So today I'm going to be speaking on why is weight loss so hard. So my name is Liz Milliken. I'm a registered psychotherapist in Ontario, and I'm going to be looking at weight loss from a psychological perspective. So the first thing that I want to focus on is that we really need to have a multidisciplinary approach to weight loss. So weight loss includes various parts of us. So I try to look at it from a whole person approach. There's your physical body, so that's the external part of you. This includes your medical history, your medical needs, things like exercise, diet, nutrition. So all of these are related to different fields of practice. So for your medical health, you see your medical doctor. For exercise, you might see a trainer or a physiotherapist. Physiotherapists are really great at helping people recognize their need for muscle strength. If you have a weak muscle group, that can end up causing you pain in different areas of your body. So identifying what your actual needs are can help you target those areas where you need the most support. If you're in pain from moving, you're going to be less inclined to move. So being able to identify what needs to be strengthened in order to make movement easier for you makes it easier to engage in exercise. For diet and nutrition, you might need to see a nutritionist or a dietitian who can give you direct feedback on what you need to do for yourself. And I make the distinction between diet and dieting. Dieting is where you follow a very restricted approach in terms of what you eat, whereas diet is something that everyone has. Everyone has what they eat, and diet can have a variety of options to it. So diet, just in general, in terms of knowing what you eat and how it impacts your body in terms of weight loss. Then internally, we have our mind and our emotions. So this is where stress, our attitude, our mindset, and our lifestyle can impact our ability to lose weight. So I like to describe it as a lifestyle because this shifts away from a dieting approach to, am I eating for health? So instead of dieting to lose a certain amount of weight in a certain amount of time and having that roller coaster of not being able to stick to your diet, approaching it through a lifestyle standpoint where you make healthier decisions instead of focusing on a specific restrictive diet that might increase your cravings for things that might not be the healthiest. So next, I want to talk about understanding emotions. So what is the purpose of emotions? So a lot of people describe their emotions in terms of positive or negative emotions, the good or bad emotions. And I try to think of it in a more neutral way. There's helpful and unhelpful emotions, or there's wanted and unwanted emotions. So if you think of something like when you stub your toe, that pain is signaling to you to be careful about where you're walking. It is a helpful thing to be able to identify that you've just injured yourself and need to be more cautious in where you're going. Whereas in the winter, you'd feel cold, so that signals you to put on more clothing. So those things are helpful to us, even though we might not find them to be comfortable. Emotions like grief feel uncomfortable. Nobody wants to feel grief, but it's a normal reaction when you're experiencing a loss. I've talked to some clients 2 months after they've lost someone, and they're like, I don't know why I'm still so upset and why I keep crying. It's like, well, it's only been 2 months. That's actually quite normal to continue to grieve. It's not considered something that's a clinical concern until the grief is significant a year later. So helping people understand their emotions and how their emotions are trying to help. You know, grief helps us to reevaluate our priorities and to focus on the relationships that are most important to us. So being able to recognize what your emotions are trying to tell you is really a helpful skill to learn. So the next piece is emotional eating. So recognizing those different emotions, feeling stressed, feeling anxious, angry, bored, lonely, sad, guilt, shame, or frustration. And then thinking about what actions would resolve these feelings. So a lot of times people feel overwhelmed and they can't identify the specific emotions that they're feeling. And knowing what action you have to take, it really does involve knowing what specific emotions you're feeling and what you can do about that. So sometimes when people are feeling stressed, just being able to recognize that, oh, my life isn't in danger, my body's just reacting as if I am. And I can just calm myself down because everything's actually okay. You know, you might have a big deadline at work, but it's not life-threatening. And so recognizing those distinctions can help calm the body. A lot of people, when they feel angry, their anger is actually hiding some deeper emotion. And so a lot of times it hides fear. It's more comfortable to feel angry than it is to feel fear. And so being able to face those emotions and know what they're telling us. What is our fear telling us? Is it trying to hide us from something, protect us from something? Or is it something, maybe you're afraid of public speaking and you just need to take that initiative and do it to become more comfortable with it? So our fears can keep us paralyzed if we don't acknowledge what they are and how they're impacting us. So, the next piece has to do with facing denial. So there's a term in psychology referred to as cognitive dissonance. So this concept has to do with the fact that we don't always feel comfortable admitting to why we're doing the things we're doing. So in the case of someone who does binge eating, they'll say, I want to lose weight, but then they'll go and binge eat because they're upset, and they'll say that their binge eating is justified because they were upset. So cognitive dissonance is when we have a hard time addressing the fact that we feel conflicted between our goals and our behaviors. So facing denial is actually something that people find really hard to do. And I think one of the best ways to do it is to actually write things down and keep a log. So if you keep a food journal of everything you eat, it's much harder to deny what your eating habits are. And you can also keep track of your exercise. And then you can look at it and evaluate, how much am I actually exercising? What am I actually eating? Where does this weight gain or weight fluctuation come from? Because you can take an honest look and not ignore the fact that you ate half a bag of chips that you don't want to write down. So even the fact that you know you'd have to write something down can actually curb that behavior that you want to change. So thinking through, how much do you eat? Is it healthy? Are you eating for nutrition? What motivates your food choices? How much do you exercise? And what's causing the disconnect? Next piece on processing emotions. So we often think when we're eating emotionally, we think, okay, the trigger was I was feeling stressed, and so I decided to eat. And we don't see any steps in between there because often that reaction can happen very quickly. But within that trigger, that stress, or it could be something as simple as maybe you put on your clothes and your clothing feels tighter. And so maybe you're feeling some shame or guilt or disgust with yourself. And then your reaction to that is to go and eat because you don't know how else to cope with it. So one of the things that I often do with people is help them increase the number of coping strategies they have so they're not just relying on one way of coping with things. So recognizing how those emotions influence the behaviors is important, but also recognizing that on a deeper level there's more going on. So that trigger, that emotion, and the behavioral response, those are often things that we see above the surface. But underneath the surface, between that trigger, like your tight clothing or someone commenting on how your clothing doesn't fit anymore, there's an interpretation that you experience. So maybe you think I'm unlovable because I weigh too much, or I'm incompetent because I can't lose weight. And you internalize it in a way that's negative and triggers those emotions of shame or guilt or disgust with yourself. And then since you don't know how to cope, you go to that behavior that you know that you're comfortable with. But before you go to that behavior, there's actually a choice that you're making. And I think it's really empowering to recognize that you do have a choice in the behaviors you choose. You can choose to eat or not eat. You can choose whether or not you're going to buy a bag of chips or not, or whatever that trigger food is for you that is most associated with your weight gain. So being able to recognize that ability to choose is something that's actually quite important because it gives you power to make different decisions. When I talk to people about sustained motivation, because weight loss is not something that's easy. It requires a lot of willpower and strength and determination. So you have to know what is going to sustain your motivation so that you can continue on this path. And motivation often requires action before you feel motivated. So people say, I don't feel motivated. Well, you haven't done anything, so why are you going to feel motivated? Usually we don't just wake up and feel motivated. But when we start doing things, then that will increase motivation. And you also have to give your self-credit for the action that you're taking. I find a lot of people, especially if they're people pleasers, they don't want to give themselves any credit. It's like, well, I did something small, and it's like, well, if you don't give yourself credit for the small things, are you giving yourself credit for anything at all? So giving yourself credit for the action you take, the good decisions you make, that will increase your motivation to make more similar decisions. Often, pursuing our goals takes more effort than we expected. So also recognizing that whatever you're pursuing, whether it's weight loss or something else, it's probably going to take you more effort to reach that goal you have. And then questioning whether or not you're thinking about this the right way. So this is a lot of the work that I do with clients. So I'll use different approaches to help them reevaluate the way they're thinking about something. So from a cognitive behavioral therapy perspective, I teach people about cognitive distortions and the different thought patterns they have that are triggering negative emotions and causing them to choose behaviors that are not helping them reach their goals. There's also the concept of overvalued beliefs. Maybe someone believes that they have to be thin in order to be liked. So that desire to be liked is what's motivating their desire for change. And they don't realize really that if they feel unloved, then they go into that emotional eating cycle because their desire to lose weight isn't motivated by the desire to be healthy, it's motivated by the desire to be loved. And there are many ways for someone to be loved that don't have anything to do with weight. From an emotion-focused therapy standpoint, I focus on relationships. What are your relationships like with other people? What is your relationship like with food? And how do those influence you? How do those trigger you? How do you interpret those things and understand those things? And it's often something that can be quite healing to reevaluate the things that you're just automatically telling yourself when there's some sort of conflict. With dialectical behavioral therapy, I talk about emotions as being like a wave. It's like the tide coming in. You can't do anything to stop the tide. It's going to come in, it's going to go out. So you can experience your emotions, you can feel your emotions without having to take any action on them. And that, again, is something that's empowering for people to realize that you don't have to do something. You can choose to just let those emotions come and let them go. From acceptance and commitment therapy, this focuses on recognizing things that you can change and have control over and making values-based choices. So if you value being healthy, you will make different decisions than if you don't have that value. So recognizing how your values influence your decisions and making decisions in line with your values is something that strengthens people and encourages them. So next I'm going to talk about goals. The goal to lose weight is a terrible goal. Why? Because you don't have control over whether or not you lose weight. You have control over what food you put into your body, and you have control over whether or not you exercise. And many times when people start exercising, their weight can go up because they build more muscle than they need, and muscle weighs more than fat. And so they look at the scale and they wonder, why am I failing? So you have no control over what that scale tells you, regardless of what you do. So a better goal is to focus on something that you have control of, something that's attainable or achievable that you can action. So it's much better to say my goal is to do 1 hour of exercise every day than it is to focus on I'm going to lose X number of pounds within this amount of time. And another goal should be I'm going to be more aware of what I'm eating and I'm going to make healthier food decisions. Those goals are something that you can actually look at and you can measure whether or not you're achieving those goals. You can say, oh, I've made improvement. You don't have to have this all or nothing approach of I've either done it or I haven't. You can look at, oh, so here was my baseline and now I've made steps to make improvement, and that's a good thing. So you might have a goal of walking for an hour a day. If you do it 4 days out of 7 in a week, that's still a huge amount of progress that you need to give yourself credit for in order to sustain that motivation. All your goals need to be relevant to your desires. So I think of weight loss as this is my desire. My desire is to lose weight. My desire is to improve my relationships with others. And then the goal is the path that will lead you in that direction. So making that distinction is important. I think also being aware of what your motivation is. As I said, if your motivation for weight loss is to be liked, you're going to run into a lot more roadblocks where you're going to get demotivated from weight loss. The best reason that should motivate you towards weight loss is that you want to be healthier, and your doctor is giving you information saying, here's what your weight goals should be. Here's how this impacts your health. And recognizing that you do actually need to make a change to what you're doing in order to live a healthy life. So making those choices out of the motivation for health is different than if you're motivated by something else that's influenced by other outside factors. It's easier to sustain your motivation when you're focused on improving your health than if you're doing it for other reasons, like to be liked or you think it will improve your desirability. So being able to recognize those different parts of what's happening internally can help you make more consistent progress towards reaching that desire of weight loss. I also encourage people not to measure it through the scale, but to actually look at your overall health. Do you have more energy? Do you notice your body is getting trimmer? And just finding other ways of looking at, are you making healthier decisions? And also keeping in mind that you should reward yourself in some way. So maybe it's planning a vacation, or you're going to do something else you like having a bubble bath or something else that is an enjoyable reward for you. Because again, having those rewards keeps you motivated. And if your goal is weight loss, you do not want your reward to be a dietary reward, because that might derail you from making those lifestyle choices that you want to make to improve your health. So in terms of developing a positive relationship with food, there's a workbook that I use with clients on intuitive eating. So this has to do with a mindset for eating for nutrition, eating for health. And when you think about food in that way, that my food is really a tool to sustain my body, to give me energy, to strengthen me, then you're thinking about food in a different way. Your dietary needs are different. So, and it's more about learning to eat when you're hungry and only for that nutrition piece. Whereas if you feel upset and that triggers your hunger, trying to figure out, is there another way that I can meet this need in this moment so that, I'm not actually hungry because I just had dinner, but I'm feeling something. So I need to find another way to address that need that's triggering the hunger, but it's not actual hunger. And I find when I'm eating, recognizing when I'm full is an important piece, because some people will eat until they're stuffed. They feel bloated, and ultimately they don't feel good because they've eaten so much that they've filled their stomach. And if you're used to eating a lot at a time, your capacity in your stomach might be higher than what it should be if you're trying to lose weight. So when I think of fullness, I think of, I no longer have the desire to eat. So as I'm eating and paying attention to how my body's feeling, I just no longer have that desire for food because I have enough. I feel satisfied. And some people will continue on to clean their plate, and this is part of recognizing how much are you eating. Are you eating more than you need to eat because you have this goal of cleaning your plate, or are you actually eating for what your body needs? Because sometimes we put more on our plate than we actually need. So another piece is mindful eating. So the benefit of this approach is you can still have that slice of cake, but maybe you only need half of the size that you would normally eat, because you're going to sit and enjoy it, and you're going to pay attention to the taste and the flavor and the texture. You're going to pay attention to what you're eating. You're going to use the fine china when you're eating, so that way the way you're thinking about food is different. It's more of a positive thing. It's something that engages you, something where you experience those tastes and those textures. You're not just shoving food into your mouth. You're being slow, you're enjoying it, you're savoring it. And this actually helps slow people down so that, when our body triggers us to tell us it's full, it takes several minutes before we actually are aware that we're full. So if you're eating more slowly, you're more likely to see that trigger and feel that trigger and be able to take action to stop eating at the right time. It's also good to think through if there are any food or weight-related traumas or injuries. I've heard stories about people when they were teenagers, their mom used to pinch a little bit of chubbiness, and there can be this feeling, this memory of, I'm not good enough if I have just a little bit of weight. So reevaluating, what are those experiences that cause pain around weight loss or weight gain? And why do I feel I have to be a certain weight? Is it because it's going to improve my health, or is it because I'm trying to meet what I think is some kind of social standard? So if anyone has any questions, they can put them in the chat and I will respond